There is music in nature, and there is nature in music. There's a similarity and there's a connection, and this is actually described by mathematics, because sound at its very core and harmony has a mathematical structure in it.
Welcome to the Our Nature podcast with me, Alyssa Benjamin. Our Nature explores the methods, systems, and practices that bring us into greater alignment with the natural world. The opportunity to live a more joyful and harmonious existence is available to each of us, right in this very moment. So join me, and let's rediscover what comes naturally. Hi everyone, welcome back to Our Nature. It's an uncertain time. I don't even know where to begin, to be honest. I'm recording this intro on March 22nd in the middle of a nationwide period of social distancing, a collective effort to flatten the curve and prevent a spike in the number of cases of coronavirus at any given time. I'm in Los Angeles, and at this point, we've been ordered to stay at home. I came here on a 3-month work contract, and now I find myself in a new city, living alone, without the comforts of my home in New York, and far away from my partner, my friends, and loved ones. I felt all sorts of emotions this past week, as I know many of you have. Anxious, overwhelmed, tired, bored, restless, sad. I've witnessed friends lose employment, small businesses struggle to survive, and an ever-growing wave of anxiety and stress capture our consciousness. There are so many people hurting, and none of us know how or when life will return to normal. I don't know if we will endure a large loss of life, or if our economy will soon resemble that of the Great Depression. What I do know is that everyone, no matter how healthy or how wealthy they are or are not, will be affected in some way. And we all need ways to cope. We need tools to turn to when fear finds a home, when stress makes a nest in our bodies, and when grief knocks at our door. Just this time last spring, I went through one of the hardest periods in my life thus far. I was attempting to pivot my career after having resigned from a company I had worked at for almost 8 years, one that was such a significant part of my identity. I had been trying to get steady work ever since leaving my full-time job, but nothing substantial was coming, and I was barely able to make rent. The stress of this persistent uncertainty took its toll on my body. I would wake up every night with acid reflux so bad that I felt incredibly overheated, as if I was having a fever. This was accompanied by nightmares, and I was clenching my jaw so tightly that my teeth would ache all throughout the next day. Not to mention that I was exhausted all the time from a lack of sound sleep. And this lack of sleep created a whole other set of health problems that I'm not going to get into, but needless to say, I was struggling. Aside from poor health, I also felt so lost. I had built an identity closely tied to my accomplishments. And when I didn't have anything external to cling to and make me feel worthy, I felt worthless. In this time of deep and prolonged despair, I intuitively turned to nature. When I felt hijacked by difficult emotions, I would sit by the Hudson River on the west side of Manhattan and journal. I would watch the Canadian geese waddle around the lawns at the park and listen to the sound of the leaves rustling in the breeze. In those moments of almost overwhelming panic, I would feel nature's stable, grounding presence. The experience of finding my way back to nature and, in time, back to myself was so profound that it compelled me to start this podcast and what I believe to be my lifelong pursuit, which is to know myself through knowing the natural world. We have largely lived life indoors, and now that it's compulsory that we remain inside, we are being magnetized towards nature. Distraction doesn't work when the discomfort reaches a pitch, which it has during this pandemic. The uncertainty, fragility, and tenuousness of this moment are all parts of man-made systems. And when those systems, the things that we consider foundational in our lives, feel like they're crumbling beneath us, we discover that nature is not crumbling. Nature is not falling apart. When you're outside, you can sense the grounded energy of the natural world. The sun isn't panicked. The flowers aren't stressed. The rivers don't have anxiety. If we are nature, when we return to the natural world, we also return to our natural selves, selves that are not dominated by our emotions or our thoughts. Even people who have not considered themselves outdoorsy or particularly interested in the natural world are finding themselves longing for nature and the support that it brings, a kind of refuge that human beings alone cannot provide. So I invite you to turn towards nature if you haven't already. If it's feasible for you, go on a walk, take a hike, swim, simply feel the warm sun on your skin. Let nature hold and support you. Let it serve as a gentle reminder that it's available and willing to offer us relief during stressful times. We need nature and also each other more than ever right now. To this end, I wanted to introduce you to a new segment that I've been working on for a while, where I'm inviting you, the listener, to share ways that you're living in harmony and alignment with the natural world, or to share an example of a recent experience where you connected with nature. To kick off this series, our first submission is from Vero Souza, an OG Our Nature listener, and the person who gave me this idea.
Hi, my name is Vero. I'm a designer specializing in branding for companies in the health and wellness space, and I live in New York City. I've done so many things that have brought me into greater alignment with the natural world. One of them is to mindfully spend time in nature, whether that's going to the park and taking a full nature bath or spending some quiet time at home with my potted plants, or even just observing the sky as I walk down the streets of New York. This practice definitely brings me more energy and reminds me that I'm also part of it.
Thank you so much, Vero, for that wonderful message. If you'd like to be featured on the next episode of Our Nature, please submit a short 1-minute voice message to ournaturepodcast@gmail.com. You can also submit via the contact form on the newly launched Our Nature website at www.ournaturepodcast.com. Please check it out if you haven't already, and I can't wait to hear from you. Okay, let's get into this week's episode. This week's episode is an incredibly fascinating conversation about music and sound with Andrea Cortez. Andrea is a board-certified music therapist, sound therapist, and sound meditation instructor. She specializes in studying the effects of music on the brain and body to help people rehabilitate from brain injury and neurological disorders. She founded the Mind Body Music Center, whose mission is to utilize and promote music's inherent therapeutic and healing qualities in order to elevate the minds, bodies, and hearts of others. Her work has brought her to playing music for animals and even with plants, using a fascinating device called Plant Wave that detects electrical variations in plants. And these variations are then translated into pitch messages that play musical instruments. Be sure to listen to the end of this episode to hear more about how Andrea composes music with plants. Throughout the conversation, you'll also have a chance to hear samples of music that Andrea has composed with plants and compiled into her Secret Song of Plants album. If you want to learn more about Andrea, her teachings, and her journey into the world of sound, tune into her podcast called Sound Meditation Radio. I'll put the link to it in the show notes, which can also be found at ournaturepodcast.com. In this episode, we talk about what music therapy is and the difference between that and sound therapy, the benefits of sound therapy on the physical and emotional body, how the voice is the most powerful instrument that exists, a simple exercise that uses your own voice to calm your body, the role that music has played for our ancestors, practical ways that we can use sound to calm our nervous system without attending a music or sound therapy session, the fascinating field of cymatics, and how sounds in nature help us heal. This episode was incredibly expansive for me and so needed in a time such as this. I hope it comforts you and opens your heart. Without further ado, let's listen to the wisdom and the sounds of Andrea Cortez. I'm so glad to talk to you and really thrilled to dig into this topic about sound and how it affects our bodies, because we all live in an environment where some spaces we can control the sound, some spaces we can't control the sound. I live in New York City, so there's a lot of sound, and maybe we call it noise, that I can't control, but yet I know it's affecting my body and affecting my nervous system in a negative way. So I'm really excited to talk about the positive effects of certain sounds and of music and what it can do for us.
Yes,
so
definitely. I'm excited to be here. I love talking about sound and its benefits. So thank you for inviting me.
you're quite welcome. So I guess the first question I had is, how would you describe what you do?
I practice music therapy. It's been my practice for about 14 years. And so this is basically just using music to create therapeutic experiences for people so that they can either have improvement in cognitive functioning, social functioning, emotional, physical benefits. So music therapy traditionally is to create a musical experience for non-musical outcomes, for health benefits. So that is my background. And I had started with neurologic music therapy, which is more music therapy for neurologic injury, brain injury, Parkinson's, this sort of thing, for rehabilitation of speech and movement. And that had been the beginning of my practice. And now I'm moving more into wellness. So music therapy is a pretty broad range of practice for, there are thousands of music therapists in the US, and it's a worldwide profession. Some people work with kids, some people work with elderly, some people work in mental health. And so I think wellness is kind of a new area for music therapy. It's a new venture out because music therapy's been really building, I think, the research, the studies, and that has been mostly in areas of rehabilitation and working with children with special needs. So this area of wellness is a new area for music therapy, and that's where I'm expanding my practice into.
So music therapy for generalized wellness.
And for stress reduction, for managing anxiety, for reducing the physical symptoms of stress in the body and in the mind.
Well, I want to get into that, but I first really want to hear your story about how you got to the place you are now and what role music has played in your life, maybe before you decided to pursue it as a profession.
Music has always been a refuge for me ever since I was small. So I kind of feel like I'm sort of a different case. I don't know if I think because I was so introverted when I was a kid, I just I just took music and it was just like my best friend. I that's I didn't have I had two close friends, and that's how introverts usually are. They usually have like a couple friends, and then so music was my world. When I was 8 years old, I started learning to play piano, and then soon after that, I was writing my own songs. I got an electric keyboard for Christmas one year, and so I was creating my own beats and like making my own music, writing stories to them. So like for me, music was a place I could go and just express myself very easily, which was not easy for me in the world of people. So it was my refuge also emotionally, um, to just have an outlet of expression. I started writing songs on guitar in high school.
Where did you grow up? What town and what kind of community?
Yeah, I grew up in Austin, Texas, South Austin.
Where we are now.
Yeah.
Woo woo.
Yes. So, yeah, I grew up in a middle class neighborhood and great parents and wonderful family and support. Yeah. Um,
And what's your heritage and what role did it play a significant role in this part of your life?
so my family was born, my mom and dad were born in Texas, but my grandparents are from Mexico. So
Where in Mexico?
I'm from Guanajuato, different places. And then Piedras Negras is where my dad's side of the family is from. Um, and I've actually never gone to meet that extended family in Mexico, but they came um, escaping the Mexican Revolution.
Wow.
Yeah. Um, I've been begging my mom to write her stories. Both my mom and my dad were actually working in the fields, like picking cotton, working in as migrant workers. But they went to school, um, got their degrees in accounting, and worked their way up to middle class
Wow.
America.
Yeah.
Really, they
the
were
American dream. Kind of.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So I had the opportunity then to play music. Now, this is the thing I was realizing the other day too, is that I don't have other musical influences in my family. My parents were the first ones to go back to school, not to go back to school, to go to higher education. Um, so I think that they worked so hard that they didn't have an opportunity to really, they couldn't afford a piano,
Yeah.
or a guitar, or they didn't pursue music. And so it seems like, okay, here's this anomaly. Andrea is like now just like the only musician in the whole family line. It seems so odd, but it's really just, I think, the opportunities now that I had as a child and what my mom and dad worked for, that I could pursue music. And I just embraced completely. I embraced it.
Yeah. There's something that Oprah talks about, and I think Maya Angelou talks about it too, of like your ancestors pay for you,
Oh,
like who's paying for you. And I think
yes.
that's such a beautiful concept. At first,
Yes.
I was trying to understand it, but what they're meaning is people you might not even know, like
Yes.
even your earlier ancestors
Mhm.
have made decisions that
Yes.
bring you to where you are. So
Mhm.
it's sort of like also living your life and thinking about who are you paying for the future. So
That's so beautiful. That's so
really nice
beautiful. It makes
concept.
me
Yeah.
want to tear up. It's beautiful because I think about my ancestors coming from Mexico, and they came here to Texas and they walked like from South Texas. My dad told me, my grandpa, they I don't know if you've been, I if you've driven from like Brownsville to Austin, there's a no man's land that's like
I just drove through Texas.
There's nothing there. So how did they do it? How did they walk? How did they eat? How did they find work? I mean, it's so much of that history is lost, but it's amazing. And just thinking about, yeah, they paid into the future of their grandkids, and now I'm in a city which is Austin's a great city for creative forces and creative thinking and ideas. So it's actually wonderful that I'm here for music therapy and for sound therapy and doing the things that I'm doing because this community is open to it. So I'm really, really grateful.
That's actually a perfect segue into my next question, which is, what is the difference between, well, actually, first of all, thank you for sharing your story. I think it's so important and wonderful to hear how people got to where they are, because it allows people listening to sort of see themselves in the people that I'm interviewing, hopefully, and hopefully feel inspired by their journeys. And I'm sure more of your story will come out as we talk, but I would love to know, what is the difference between sound therapy and music therapy?
So right now, music therapy is offered as a field of study at universities across the world, and sound therapy is not. Sound therapy is new, a new field, and it's certainly a valid field. It's just new and it hasn't expanded into university, that level of study. So that's one difference. But as for music therapy and traditional music therapy, it's really the study is focused around people, kids with special needs, geriatrics, mental health, and creating music interventions like live music interventions and activities that help to work on functional skills. So, I mean, there's a lot of similarity between applications for music therapy and sound therapy. But the one thing that is unique to sound therapy is the focus on frequencies and vibration, which is not really focused in on music therapy or studied in frequencies specifically, like how are getting down to like the what sound is made of.
I see. As opposed to how gentle sounds will affect our nervous system in music therapy.
In music therapy, there's applications of how certain styles of music can help. We do get down to the elements, rhythm. How is rhythm helping to rehabilitate motor skills and movement and speech, stuff like that. So there's a lot of similarity between music therapy and sound therapy. But really, this idea of breaking it down to frequencies and vibration, and the certain instruments too that are very common in music therapy. Sound therapy. You find singing bowls and gongs, and there's more of a spiritual aspect that seems to be running through sound therapy as well.
So are sound baths considered sound therapy?
I think so. Yeah. These are all sort of new terms and it can be confusing for people, I think, but yeah, sound bath and sound therapy are similar. Sound healing. So I think it's good to be careful though around this idea of sound healing, because we come to it with an idea that, oh, this sound is going to heal me. And this is something that I think is a topic that needs to be addressed in turning our ideas around about healing, that we don't necessarily need to always go to someone to get healed, or we have this power of healing that we have to discover within ourselves. And so saying the term sound healings, it kind of conjures up an idea of I'm laying there and I'm being healed by the vibrations. So it's more than that. It's more complex. And I think it's good to bring that up.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because this podcast is really focused on people sharing their knowledge about ways that we can reconnect with the natural world and our natural ways of being, but with the ultimate goal that learn the knowledge, but then become your own healer. Like, I'm very careful about having people on the show who are selling like all these fancy devices. I mean, we don't do that because my whole thing is just rediscover what comes naturally for you. And that can be a key for your own health and well-being in a general sense.
Yes. I think it's empowering. And I think we have to re-empower ourselves as, I mean, a nation, for all the people here in the U.S., you know, for our ideas of thinking about a medicine and health, we have to empower ourselves again.
You do. So it's my understanding that you do sound therapy now. Is that correct?
I do both.
You do both.
I do music therapy and sound therapy. I still have a lot of clients that are in my traditional music therapy sessions, and I have my own studio, physical location where I have sound therapy sessions with the singing bowls, the gong, and the harp.
Okay. Well, let's talk about sound therapy for a minute, because that is becoming ever popular. What are the benefits of sound therapy, both for our physical body and our emotional body?
Sound therapy can help with the central nervous system. It can help you to get out of a fight or flight. It helps the nervous system to get into a state of deep relaxation. And so this happens through the auditory system. We're taking in the information, the sound information, through the auditory system, and it directly impacts the whole nervous system. So we're wired for sound. We are wired to have quick responses to sound. Just think about when you hear something that crashes or it alerts your nervous system and you go into a fight or flight for a minute,
a
right?
bang or a loud noise.
So we are wired to respond. Okay, that sound is telling me I need to get out of here. I need to make sure I'm safe. So sounds can do the opposite and can turn that relaxation response on in the body. And you can also sort of recondition your nervous system. If you're able to do these sorts of sound therapy for yourself, then it can retrain your nervous system out of always being in this state of fight or flight. And I don't think we realize how much we're there in that.
Oh, I'm there all the time. I'm like not breathing.
Yeah, it's so
feeling
crazy.
Incredibly anxious.
Like, I mean, I'm a therapist, but I go through that, and I'm especially like with all the things that I need to run for running my business. I mean, I find myself like on edge, and I'm like, why am I on edge? So it's constantly taking that conscious awareness. Okay, I need to just get back into a state of relaxation. And so sound does that pretty quickly, and it's because it's coming directly through the auditory system and affecting the whole nervous system. But that's not the only way we take in sound. We take it in through our ears, but we take it in through the body. So we have, if you're listening to live music or live instruments, we have mechanoreceptors on our skin, and these detect vibration. So it's another way we soak in and detect vibration.
And we can tell through that whether the vibration is a harmonious vibration versus a staccato one that is upsetting.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we can feel that, we can hear that. Yeah, and we have different responses. We don't have to understand it. It just happens naturally, right?
Naturally, yeah. You mentioned that people have the ability to activate, I guess it would be the parasympathetic system in our bodies, the rest and digest system through sound. What's a way that we can do that?
So if you don't have an instrument, you can use your voice. Actually, everyone has an instrument, and that is the voice. The voice is the most powerful instrument, in my opinion, because it's resonating so deeply within us. What other instrument can do that to get so deep? So the voice is a powerful instrument. You can vocalize even just on open vowel sounds for extended periods, like a whole extended exhale, vocalize on open vowel sounds. This is really, really helpful for extending your breath cycles. So your voice is connected to your breathing.
Mm-hmm.
That's connected to your prana. If you're gonna,
Yeah.
it's connected to your chi, to the energy running through the body. So the voice is such a powerful tool to use.
Can we try it? And do you have one exercise that we could try, and then we could all do it together for anyone who's listening right now and
Sure.
see how
Sure.
we feel?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so there's a couple sounds that are really good. The ah sound and the oo sound are really helpful for the heart too. So here we go, getting into to something a little more spiritual, to the heart center. But these sounds are good for relaxing the nervous system too. So let's try this. We'll take in a deep breath first, exhale, and then take in another deep breath, and then you can join me on the ah.
Okay.
So breathing in first, exhaling out, breathing in. Breathing in again. Breathing in again. Breathing in, changing the sound to oo. Again, breathing in. One last time, breathing in. Breathing in. Exhaling out. So that was just 6 sounds we did, just 3 of ah, 3 of oo. And I already feel like the difference in my head too. I mean, there's also
That's great.
There's even like an oxygen boost. So getting more air and oxygen running through the body. There's so many different effects. It's also affects the heart, the vagus nerve. So these things are all related to our ability to heal and repair. The vagus nerve is really important in the nervous system and repairing.
What does the vagus nerve do for us?
It's regulating, it's closely related to the parasympathetic nervous system and helping the body to regulate.
Well, I felt an immediate difference. So is that why people in Ayurveda, or in India, people chant Om, and then in different cultures, there's always different kinds of chanting and resonant sounds?
There's always some kind of use of voice across cultures for practices, spiritual practices and rituals and ceremony. In India, in the Vedic tradition, there is an understanding how vibration can change physical space. So they use that to connect also to Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, so to divine vibrations. there's a deep understanding in that tradition that doing chant, using the sacred Sanskrit words, helps to connect to divine vibrations, and bringing in divine vibrations is helpful for us. So
It's such a beautiful tradition in so many cultures, the idea of singing and chanting.
mm-hmm.
I want to talk about sound baths. Because they've become really popular.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's kind of hosting one.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to one. I've only been to one once.
Mm-hmm.
So I love music.
Mm-hmm.
That's my stories. I love music. The way that I learn anything is through sound. So I used to sing all of my math problems and everything, because if I hear it, I know it. So I haven't looked into like scientifically what that is. I just know that that's how I am. I'll know it immediately.
It connects multiple areas in your brain.
Okay, so it works for me. So I'm very musically inclined, that's to say, and I was a dancer. But I went to a sound bath, and it was a long one. You laid down, they play it for at least an hour or so. And honestly, I felt really agitated afterwards. Like I felt almost kind of unsafe. It was just like, it was a lot. It was a little too loud. It felt like it was too much for my body. Can you talk about that?
Yes.
Because after I went to one, I was like, well, that's not for me. I'll never go again.
No.
And yeah, I'd love for you to talk, because I don't know if many people have had the same experience, and maybe they don't want to talk about it, but I was like, this is not for me.
No. So I know this from hearing people talk about this. And when I've played, I do I call them sound meditations. I don't call them sound baths, just for the reason because it brings in, you're part of the formula here for this experience, to be present and to be mindful. Meditation brings that aspect in. So I do sound meditations with Tibetan singing bowls and crystal bowls. So both the metal bowls and the crystal bowls and the gong. And I've heard this comment a few times at my sound meditations where people are like, oh, there was nothing jarring in your sounds, or there was nothing like that made me cringe. And I'm thinking, why would that be the case in anywhere? So I think the issue here is that this is a new trend coming. Everybody wants to get a crystal bowl. Everybody wants to get a Tibetan bowl. But there's not a lot of resources for learning how to play them properly. And it looks easy. But I really recommend that when someone is facilitating, that they're also musically trained. That's important. The other aspect that I bring in is being a therapist. I've worked with groups of people, and I know that I need to understand the dynamics of the group. My opinion is it's much better to just play something that is more gentle and more restorative on that end of the spectrum, because whoever is the most sensitive in the group, I need to play for them and then go from there. So
I love that.
So I am very sensitive myself, so I wouldn't want to be in a sound experience that's overwhelming, where I feel like I just need to get up and leave the room or something. So that, in my opinion, is just a consequence of this becoming a trend so fast, and there's not enough training. So musical training is important, but also an understanding of therapy. I think that needs to be.
And I think I love that you mentioned playing for the most sensitive person in the room, because I'm just thinking about what I've learned about people's nervous systems, and some just are more sensitive than others to sound or to electronics, and it's okay. We're all different, but where, again, I live in New York City, and like, I know that for some people, the sound isn't as bothersome. For me, like my whole system goes crazy as soon as I hear a siren or a loud noise.
Yes.
So,
yes, definitely. Mm-hmm.
This podcast is all about rediscovering what comes naturally for us. So I really want to talk about what was the role that music and sound played for our ancestors. Kind of like this idea of this isn't a new thing.
Okay.
This has been
Yes.
part of many cultures for
Yes.
thousands of years.
Yes.
And was it used in a therapeutic way? Was it used in a communicative way?
Yes.
Was it used in a community building way?
Yes, exactly. I found an article that said they found the oldest instrument ever found in Germany, in these caves in Germany. It was a flute made of bone, 43,000 years old.
Wow.
And it already had a tuning to it. It was tuned to a pentatonic scale, which is a 5-note scale, which is also common to across all musical systems in the world, this 5-note scale, which is very interesting to me. So why were they building instruments? Okay, think back that long ago. Why were they using their time and their resources?
That's true.
To
They were trying to
build-
survive. So
Yes, to build instruments if it wasn't somehow helping their survival at that time. So there are some researchers that believe that music was beneficial to the evolution of us, that it actually helped give us an advantage over Neanderthals, actually, as a group. It helped us to survive. And this is because of social bonding and communication. So music, okay, this is so interesting because now we understand when we play music together, we're not only bonding like we think, oh, we're socially bonding, but there's actually in the brain, we entrain to the same brainwave patterns that happens. Our breathing starts to entrain. Movements can entrain because you're moving to the rhythm together. So you sync at so many levels when you're playing music as a group together, singing our instruments. So this is how they used music. This is the original way of using music to. It was the glue. It was the glue to bring the communities together.
in talking about our ancestors we were talking a bit before we started recording about how do we honor the traditions from where all of these sounds came from. I'd love to hear more about that from your perspective and also hear from you. What are the instruments that you use in music therapy and the role that they play and why you use those instruments?
So I'm using the Tibetan singing bowls. The Tibetan singing bowls are also called Himalayan bowls, and they're made in Nepal, actually. So the gong, too, I use the gong. These are instruments from Asia. They have a tradition there that's sort of hidden. So I've read about the history of these singing bowls, and the Buddhist monks seem to have used these instruments for meditation, but there's something else. Even before Buddhism, maybe they were used in indigenous practices for altering states of consciousness and for healing. But it's really hard to get to the real source of it because a lot of that knowledge gets sort of protected in a way, and people have tried to dig that up. And I think it gets, especially I find that in indigenous practices, a lot of protection around the knowledge. So I use these instruments, and in terms of honoring where they've come from, I think this is really important to respect and understand the context from where the instruments come from and how they're used, and not to sort of take them and be like, okay, now uh, this is my own, and then kind of go take it way off. I don't know how to explain it, but um,
Not to take it for yourself.
yeah, but more than that, and make claims that they can do things that they really can't. This is where it gets kind of um, on this line of like with sound healing, like there's a lot of claims being made now in using these instruments of, oh, now they can do this and that and 432 hertz and this, it's like, where is this coming from? And so to just be careful around that. I love science, I love research, but I also love spirituality and traditions, cultural, ancient traditions. And so it's just, you just have to know where you're getting the information from, know the context from what tradition you're taking that from, and respect and be humble, I think.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from you is I think the first step probably would be if you are going to use a tradition, learn about the tradition.
Yes.
And maybe that's a misstep
Yes.
sometimes for people.
Yes. Yes, definitely. I think it's people we all are really looking for healing, medicine. We're looking for medicine to help us to feel better in these times, and we're reaching back to ancient traditions.
Yeah.
So, and that's great. It's great, but it's also an area we need to be really careful about. And then all of a sudden, I'm a shaman within like a weekend retreat or something. I think that we have to be really careful about making claims like that.
Oh, now I'm hearing some music in the background. So if you hear that on the podcast, this is someone grooving or something. I know you mentioned this before, but I want to ask it again in case there's something else that you would suggest. But if I don't want to go to a sound bath or a music therapy session, how can I incorporate sounds into my healing life on a regular basis? Mm-hmm. And you talked about sounds that we produce ourselves, but mm-hmm. Are there other things? Are there places we can go to hear healing sounds? I'm thinking like into the natural world or...
Oh yes, definitely. Go into nature, listen to the natural sounds. This is something that I did want to mention, is that there is music in nature and there's nature in music. There's a similarity and there's a connection. And this is actually described by mathematics, because sound at its very core and harmony has a mathematical structure in it. If you look in nature and you look at a flower, you see the structure, you see the patterns,
yeah.
You see the golden mean, the golden ratio in the sunflower, the spiral, all these beautiful, beautiful geometrical patterns in nature. It's in sound, but we can't see it, it's just amazing. So there's actually a field called cymatics that it studies of vibration in liquids. And if you look this up, you can see these beautiful pictures of how liquids are vibrated by one single note, and it creates this beautiful symmetrical geometrical shapes in the liquids, and they look like shapes in nature. So we can see that sound is organizing physical matter. It has this within it. So there's music in nature and there's nature in music. And so if you go into nature, nature has intrinsically in it harmony, rhythm, pulse, melody. The birds have their songs to communicate. The rhythm of water flowing. There's overtones and harmonics in these sounds that are very relaxing for us and for our nervous system.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. I used to have a sound machine that my dad had when I was a little kid, and whenever I would get sick, he was an attorney, but he would let me come to his office. It was always like when I was sick, I would go visit my dad. For some reason, it was so funny. And he would set me up with a little blanket under his desk. And I'd play down there, and all day people come in his office and talk, and I'd just be down there, and he would give me this sound machine, and I would play different sounds on the sound machine to entertain myself. Are we biologically wired to feel relaxed when we listen to something like ocean waves? And is that a way to signal that this is a safe space, or water maybe is inherent to our survival? So we're near water and that's a good thing. How does that work?
So we're made of the elements in nature. We have harmony in us. We have these same elements. We are nature. So connecting to that in that way. And I love this practice of listening deeply in nature. So being there. Now this you can do a sound meditation in nature. Sit by the running water, listen to the wind, listen to what animals you hear, and listen deeply. So you're connecting your own conscious awareness to these sounds, but these sounds are in you too. And you're made up of these same elements. So it helps your mind, but also helps the physical body. So that's a good practice, just sitting in nature and with listening deeply.
It's a mindfulness practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there we go. That's something practical that the next time that our nature listeners are in nature, they can do that. I want to do it.
You know what you could add in too? You could even, while you're sitting there, you could find a tone. And if it's in your range, you can hum it. You can ah it. You can ooh it or oh it. Make that sound so that you're resonating the same sound that you're hearing. That would be really cool.
I love that. I'll try it.
Yeah.
I'm ready
I want to do that now.
I want to talk a bit about how we are nature and how these harmonies in some ways are inside of us. Like you said, we are music and music.
Yes. How are we music?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And these are just curiosities of mine. And I'm hoping other people listening have the same questions, but you often hear those studies about women who are pregnant, who listen to classical music or classical music when you're studying and the brain. And then I've seen this trend of all of these young children going to music classes. They're attending music classes and they're dancing and things like that. Are they all tapping into the very thing you mentioned around what these sounds and harmonies, how they affect our bodies?
So as far as with kids and early childhood development, music helps a lot. But with training with rhythm and melody, it's a support for development for children.
I see.
Mm-hmm. And what was the other question?
It was about the studies. We've read the studies that if you listen to classical music when you're pregnant, it's supposedly helpful, or listening to it while you're studying, or you hear those stories.
Yeah. So they're all different. Music acts on us in different ways. So if we're listening while we're studying, for example, it can help us for focus and attention, depending on the music itself. Actually, I just did a podcast on creativity in the brain, and Einstein
listened to it.
Yeah, he was a musician, and so when he was brainstorming, he would play music to help him come up with that aha moment. So so it was actually showing if you want to use music for creativity, the way you do that is step away from your problem solving for a moment and then listen to music or play music and allow the brain to rest from the problem solving, and then it helps with the creativity.
So if you ever are stuck with a problem, try music.
Yes.
That's so exciting.
Well, in the other ways we're musical, I just want to mention this too, because we have music in us. How are we music? Our breathing is rhythmic. Our heartbeat is rhythmic. The brain waves that run on electrical activity in our brain, these run on frequencies and cycles. It's rhythmic. So we have that already, and everything has to be harmonized together in us to work properly in timing and sync.
Yeah.
So there's music there. Mm-hmm.
I want to this is kind of a sidestep, but I want to bring up binaural beats because I've experimented with them myself for relaxation, and sometimes I feel it, sometimes I don't. Do they work in the same way that instruments like the singing bowls and chimes would work?
Mm-hmm. So I haven't looked into binaural beats a lot. I think because I'm just really interested in the acoustic information that comes out of the instruments themselves. And the binaural beats are created, digitally.
Yeah.
But they're creating frequencies to give that pulse, so you're hearing that difference. The singing bowls actually, when you hear the Tibetan singing bowls, they have so many overtones coming out that you get that similar response of hearing the pulses. So the overtones are very therapeutic for us to listen to. This is all structured sound information. It has actually mathematical ratios in it,
which is why it's soothing for us.
It's helpful. It's organizing brain activity as well. I had a client come in who had an EEG headset.
Yeah.
He brought in, he had a brain injury, but he brought in his headset and we hooked it up to see, you can see the real time graph on his phone. It was an app. So I played a Tibetan singing bowl in front of him. So he sat there, closed his eyes, I played it, and immediately we saw the activity on the graph change to all blue, which was signaling like brain activity was going calm and just also organized across the brain. So it was amazing. It was fast.
That's
too.
Fascinating. Yeah.
His activity in his brain changed so quickly. And then we did it just without the bowl, just him sitting there and closing his eyes. And it didn't happen as quickly and as much. So the sound really, it's sending in information immediately. We take that in. So I wouldn't give up on the bowls because I've had people, also come into sessions and say, I don't want to hear the bowls. I want to hear the heart because I don't like the sounds of the bowls. But you have to find someone who knows how to play them just right.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to do that we'll add to the end of this episode is maybe like a very short therapeutic sound moment that you'll play.
Yeah, I can play a couple of the bowls.
Yeah, I think that would be really nice as a way to end the episode. Yes. So I want to get into the difference between music and noise. Music and noise. You talked about how soothing sounds are mathematically organized in the brain and then they create calm. I once read this book. It was actually about creativity that mentioned that when Stravinsky premiered The Rite of Spring, his symphony, that there was a riot because the sounds were so dissonant and pulsating that they really upset the crowd, or that's what the accounts say. I wanted to ask about that. And was that underscoring what you talked about in terms of it was very disorganized? And is that why some people don't like free jazz? It's like really upsetting for our nervous system. Or is there a part of cultural programming that is overlaid into that where we're like, I don't like that?
Yeah, definitely all of that. When he premiered that concert, they were in a time where it was very foreign. So I think it's part culturally, they weren't ready to hear that. So there was that aspect definitely. And then, dissonance if it's constant dissonance, I don't I don't think we're meant to be in that constant dissonance. So dissonance has a place in music, and that is um, that when you hear the dissonance and then it resolves to the harmony or back to the fundamental tone of the music, then we feel a release. They've done studies on this that actually that resolve can create a chill effect, like you get the chills.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the nervous system responds to that, like, okay, there's resolve. So dissonance has a place, but constant dissonance seems like that would just build tension. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it did. It must have. They were rioted.
Yeah, and so the difference between noise and harmonious sounds, there is a mathematical difference, and um, sound is made of frequencies and overtones. So when we hear harmonious sound, the frequencies are related by a whole number ratio, mathematical ratio, whole number mathematical ratios, and noise is not like that. They're more random, the frequencies as related to each other mathematically. So it would be like looking at a beautiful geometrical shape as harmony, and then looking at another shape that's more distorted. You can think of it visually too, and that would be the visual difference in sound.
I want to make sure that we cover a couple of interesting things that you have done in particular. One of those being playing music with plants.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about how you first came across this device? It used to be called MIDI Sprout, but now it's called Plant Wave.
Yes.
How did you come across that, and why did you decide to collaborate with plants?
So I had seen it before, but I actually had someone from California come to Austin to do a collaboration of music and sound meditation. So he brought the MIDI Sprout with him. He's great. His name's Josh. They go by Flower and Frequency. That's their name, and out in San Francisco. So he brought the MIDI Sprout and his plant. I played the harp, and I loved the MIDI Sprout. So I got one, and I think at the time, though, my view and perspective of music therapy, sound therapy, was just opening up. I started to play with animals, playing my harp with animals, seeing the benefits there. And my view and perspective was like, wait a minute, this is not just about us. It's about all of nature, and we're nature. And it was just all coming together. And so to just start playing music with plants was seemed so easy. And I was being pulled into that direction. And so this device, Plant Wave now, it hooks up to the leaves of the plant, detects the electricity running through the plant, and then the sounds will change depending on its response to its environment. Like if I touch the plant, the sounds will change, and you can hear that response. You get a real-time audio feedback of the plant's response.
And for those who are skeptical about this or who have never really heard about this, how do plants how do they respond to touch and sound?
So basically, it's the electrical the way this device is working. It detects the electrical energy. So we have an electrical current running through us. It's known. We have
It's like our aura,
yeah,
in some ways.
And kind of. And so the electromagnetic field, we produce this electromagnetic field because of the electrical currents that are running through us. When we touch the plant, it's sort of closing the circuit. It detects, it responds to our touch. So the electrical activity in the plant changes, and then the way that the device picks it up is that it detects the electrical changes, and there's a template of sounds So it's not, the plant isn't creating like whatever note it wants to. I mean, there is a program template of sounds from which it can choose. If it can choose its own sound.
That's so cool. So does every living thing respond to music and sound?
Yeah. I have, the more that I have played music like in nature and with animals, I've just seen that so much. Um, I've seen it with horses. I've seen it with dogs. I've seen it with cats. I've played my harp, and yeah, it definitely. I always see an observable response to the music.
It can be a universal connector then
Yes.
between us.
Yes, it is.
Is there anything else that you would like to share about music, about sound, about this vast topic?
Here's one last thing. I think that right now I feel like we're reaching out to connect to nature more, especially at this time because we're so connected to machines 24/7, to our phone, to the car, to the computer. Social media is taking over. I mean, social media is great, and it's how we connected here, but there has to be a balance. And I think that's why I am finding more and more people really trying to reach out to nature, because intuitively we know this is us. We're humans, we're not machines. So we need to have the balance. We need to have that balance. And by connecting to nature, I think we're creating that balance. So technology is great. Social media, I mean, this has benefits for us, but making that balance, I think, is what we need. And connecting into nature is how we can regain that balance.
That's why I have this podcast.
Yay!
So thank you. Yes, I 100% agree. Alrighty, we are going to get into the last 5 questions, which is a rapid fire round. So it doesn't mean you need to talk very quick,
Okay.
but just say whatever comes to your mind first.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. What is your favorite place in nature?
You mean location on the planet or in general?
It can be whatever it means for you.
Hawaii, Maui, the beach, swimming with the turtles. Yes.
What is the animal, mineral, or plant that resonates with you the most?
The animal, a horse.
And you've played with horses.
Yeah, I played the harp.
Harp
Yes.
for horses.
Yeah.
What is one thing we can do right now to connect with the natural world and bring more harmony into our lives?
I think it's learning how to listen deeply. It's a practice that we don't have really. That's common. So listening deeply in nature.
What is the greatest lesson nature has taught you?
Mm. The greatest lesson nature has taught me is that it's a reflection, it's a mirror. And I think it makes me feel vast, it makes me feel expansive. And that's what it gives me every time I connect.
I love that. It's a mirror.
Yes.
So true. Complete the sentence. Nature brings me.
Peace.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you for listening to that entire conversation with Andrea Cortez. I hope it brought you some much needed calm. If you've enjoyed this episode, please forward it to a friend or family member who you think would enjoy it as well. If you don't want to miss another episode of Our Nature, please subscribe to the podcast and sign up for the Our Nature podcast newsletter, which you can find at the bottom of the homepage of ournaturepodcast.com. Stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. You just listened to an episode of the Our Nature podcast. If you liked this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review it. Thank you so much for listening. Stay curious, and I'll see you next week.